Diana Morales slid into the first-class cabin, and the air changed. Unspoken, yet palpable. The soft murmur of conversation stuttered, eyes flicked up from tabloids and smartphones, and hands tightened on Louis Vuitton bags. She moved with quiet pride. Her silver hair wound into a neat chignon, her posture straight, yet none of it mattered. In this exclusive world of polished leather and golden mood lighting, her dark skin spoke louder than her calm confidence, and it spoke of a difference nobody here wanted to acknowledge. Clarissa Vaughn had been all smiles and warm greetings since boarding began, but the instant Diana approached, her warmth froze over. "Good evening, ma'am," Clarissa said, voice silky but thin as ice. She didn't meet Diana's eyes or even take the ticket with respect. Instead, she pinched it between two fingers and let it drop on the counter as though it were litter. Diana bent to pick it up. Steady, measured. But the power play stung, and it would not be the last. Clarissa lingered before the scanner, feigning a technical glitch. "Oh dear," she murmured into her headset, tapping at her tablet like it might self-destruct. "Your ticket's flagged. Must be a system error. I'll need to double-check before you board." Diana stood silent as a line formed behind her. Warm champagne clinked ahead, punctuated by polite laughter, while other travelers breezed past, their designer heels tapping in unison, their whispered comments woven with judgment. Moments later, a well-heeled couple in tweed blazers and pearls arrived. "Mr. and Mrs. Belmont," Clarissa cooed, lighting up as if greeting royalty. No ticket scan, no nod to procedure. "Right this way," she said, ushering them through without a second glance. Diana's chest tightened. A middle-aged businessman spared her a concerned look, but Clarissa, ever the consummate professional, brushed him off with, "Minor seat mix-up. Happens all the time." He nodded and moved on, leaving Diana marooned in the spotlight of her own indignity. Every polished detail of that cabin screamed privilege. Soft leather that cradled you, dim golden lamps making every face glow, the faint scent of Chanel No. 5 mingling with fresh espresso. Yet none of it extended to her. Instead, she was the sideshow, the novelty of seeing someone like her in first class. When she finally reached her seat, Clarissa vanished as if nothing had happened, until she reappeared a few rows ahead, voice pitched just loud enough for the cabin to hear. "Isn't it wonderful to see more diversity up here these days?" she mused. The compliment landed harder than any insult. Diana eased into the plush chair Clarissa had allotted her, one where the armrests squeaked and the tray table wobbled. Whispers snaked behind champagne flutes. One man in a navy suit snorted, "They'll let just about anyone in here these days." A young woman clutching a Birkin bag frowned at Diana's ticket as if it were counterfeit, the kind of laughter that leaks disdain from every pore. Each chuckle was a tiny blade, and Diana felt them all. Then, as cabin chatter hushed, Clarissa's voice cut through again. "Attention, ladies and gentlemen. We have a small seating confusion. Our dear guest here appears to have accidentally booked first class instead of economy. If anyone is willing to trade, please let us know." Heads turned, faces hardened. A ripple of smirks. Diana felt her pulse thrum in her ears. She could taste the iron tang of humiliation rising in her throat. The attendant, Sasha, cross-checked the manifest beside Clarissa. "No open seats in economy," Sasha reported, voice quavering. Clarissa flashed a pitying smile. "Well, then she'll stay," she announced, tone sweet as venom, "though I'm sure she'd be more comfortable down there." Her emphasis on comfortable was a taunt. Diana's presence was the discomfort. The cabin exhaled a collective shudder. Diana's hands folded gracefully in her lap. She was a woman who'd spent decades proving herself in boardrooms filled with men who believed her place was the typing pool. She'd endured worse. Corporate betrayals, whispered conspiracies, but never such blatant, unchallenged cruelty. Now, in a room designed for pampering and prestige, she was reduced to the color of her skin. Yet beneath the sting of pity burned a colder resolve. She would not shrink. She would not vanish. She raised her chin and cleared her throat. The cabin stilled at the shift in her bearing. "Miss Vaughn," Diana said, voice calm but edged with steel, "would you clarify your policy on ticket verification? I've recorded every moment of this exchange." She tapped her purse and retrieved her smartphone, the screen casting a soft glow. "I believe the U.S. Department of Transportation frowns on discrimination. Perhaps you'd like to explain this to them." Phones clicked. A hush of surprised gasps rippled through first class. Clarissa's practiced mask cracked. "Ma'am, if you—" she began, but Diana held up a slender finger. "No, let me finish. I have a valid ticket. I've complied fully, yet you delay and demean me because of who I am. I expect an apology now, or I'll share this video with your airline's corporate office, the media, and the federal authorities." Her voice was steady, but the steel beneath it made every listener stiffen. A murmur of support swelled. The businessman who'd offered sympathy rose to his feet. "She's right," he said, fixing Clarissa with a steady gaze. "This is unacceptable." Others leaned forward, expressions softening with solidarity. Flight attendants exchanged glances. One gently touched Clarissa's arm. "Clarissa, let's step aside." Humiliation flooded Clarissa's face as she stammered apologies to Diana, then to the cabin, before retreating behind the curtain. As she slipped away, the cabin erupted in warm applause, scattered claps that grew into a chorus of approval. Diana lowered her phone, sliding it back into her purse. She took a measured breath, and the applause rippled into hushed admiration. Diana settled back into her seat, regal once more. The murmur turned to a buzz of congratulatory whispers. A flight attendant offered her a flute of champagne. She accepted with a gracious nod. As the engines rumbled to life, Diana raised her glass in a quiet toast to the cabin. In that moment, justice was served, not with anger, but with dignity. And for the rest of that flight, everyone remembered that first class belonged to the deserving, by ticket or by grace. Diana Morales sat stiffly in the cramped aisle-side seat, the cramped space a cruel reminder that she'd been demoted twice now, first from her original 2A and then again from the center row. Clarissa Vaughn hovered over her like a vulture, assessing carrion. "Make sure she gets extra assistance during the flight," Clarissa had whispered to Sasha, her tone syrupy sweet, eyes glittering with malice. "I wouldn't want her to struggle with the first-class amenities." A ripple of laughter followed as Sasha sank her gaze. The cabin returned to its polished calm. Champagne flutes refilled, hushed business calls resumed, but Diana felt the lingering weight of disdain pressing against her shoulders. She kept her back ramrod straight, fingers clenched in her lap, head held high despite the humiliation. The other passengers barely noticed her now, already moved on from the spectacle she'd become. Yet Clarissa wasn't finished. She drifted down the aisle until she reached Diana's row again, humming thoughtfully as she tapped her manicured nails against the leather headrest of an empty seat. "You know," she began, voice breezy, "there was so much confusion earlier. We ought to make sure everyone's exactly where they belong." Her eyes flicked to a well-dressed young man waiting by the galley. "Mr. Jennings," she called, smiling as if greeting an old friend. "You were upgraded last minute. Would you mind taking seat 2A?" The man blinked, glanced at Diana's former spot, and hesitated. Diana felt her pulse spike. She'd been moved once, spat from one seat to another, and now she watched as her original perch, the best seat in first class, was offered to a total stranger. Mr. Jennings cleared his throat. I don't mind," he stammered, uneasy in the glare of his fellow passengers. "Oh, nonsense," Clarissa said, patting his arm. "We want you comfortable." Then she turned back to Diana. "And let's be honest, you might find this more suited to your needs," she said, gesturing to the cramped aisle seat where Diana already sat. He rose, and Diana's mouth went dry as he slid into 2A, glancing down at her with an apologetic frown. Clarissa clapped her hands, delight twinkling in her eyes. "Wonderful! Thank you for being so understanding." Diana rose slowly, head high, and slipped into the inferior seat without a word. The new seat felt colder, narrower, her dignity crushed into the thin cushion. Mr. Jennings settled into her former space, shifting uncomfortably, and Clarissa watched them both with a satisfied smirk. Then Clarissa lurched forward again, hands on hips, eyes bright with anticipation. "Oh, one last thing," she chirped. "Would you mind apologizing for the confusion? We wouldn't want any misunderstandings lingering." Heat flamed in Diana's cheeks. She clenched her fists in her lap, swallowing the protest that threatened her voice. Around her, the cabin fell silent, passengers feigning interest in in-flight menus, phones, anything but the woman they'd just tormented. Finally, Diana drew a calming breath. "I apologize for any inconvenience," she said, voice measured, carrying across the aisle like a bell. Clarissa beamed, pleased. "See? That wasn't so hard." She swept away, letting her shoulder brush Diana's arm on the way. A tiny, deliberate reminder of Diana's place. The cart appeared moments later, Clarissa at the helm, distributing meals with mechanical efficiency. When she reached Diana, she slowed, tilting her head. "Mrs. Morales," she said, voice dripping faux concern. "Would you prefer something soft, perhaps soup?" The implied jab at Diana's age sent a pang of sorrow through her, but she forced a neutral expression. "I'll take the chicken," she replied softly. Clarissa's brow rose in mock surprise, but she made no protest. She placed the tray on Diana's tray table with just a fraction more force than necessary. "Enjoy," she said, and moved on. Diana lifted her fork, but Clarissa, feigning accident, lurched the cart. The tip struck Diana's tray, and scalding hot gravy cascaded across her lap. A collective gasp rose from nearby seats. Clarissa's hands flew to her lips in mock horror. "Oh dear, that was clumsy of me. I'm so sorry." Her voice rang clearly for everyone to hear. Diana's breath caught in her throat as the boiling warmth seared through her slacks and skin. The sticky gravy and mashed potatoes clung to her legs, the smell pungent and humiliating. Passengers looked over, then quickly looked away. Clarissa sighed dramatically, shaking her head. "I should have been more careful with you," she murmured, as if she were the injured party. "At your age, I imagine you've had your fair share of little accidents." The words landed like a blow. She spun toward Sasha. "Actually, never mind," she said, snatching a handful of napkins and tossing them into Diana's lap. "Here, you can clean yourself up. You're used to that, right?" The napkins fluttered onto the mess, useless. No one reached to help. Diana sat motionless for a beat, then, with slow dignity, lifted the napkins and began patting at the gravy, each movement a testament to her composure. Sasha hovered, eyes brimming with sympathy, but Clarissa's glare pinned her in place. The cabin's hum dwindled. A quiet hush settled over the rows. When Diana finished wiping herself, hands methodical, precise, Clarissa reappeared, this time pushing the cart back to the galley. She paused in the aisle, lips curved in a triumphant smile, but her eyes flicked back to Diana's stain-marked slacks. "Since you're already cleaning up," she called, voice loud enough for nearby passengers to hear, "why don't you help us out?" She held up an empty service tray. "I assume you're used to this kind of work." A ripple of suppressed laughter trailed behind her. Diana remained seated, hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed ahead. Clarissa hesitated a moment, then leaned closer, voice a whisper that carried. "Oh dear, did I overestimate you? At your age, heavy lifting isn't ideal, is it?" A businessman across the aisle laughed quietly, the sound rich and mocking. Clarissa's eyes gleamed with victory. Then, something shifted. A young flight attendant stepped forward, her chestnut hair tucked into a neat bun. "Clarissa," she said softly but firmly. That's enough. The cabin held its breath. Clarissa's lips pressed into a thin line. We need to move on, Clarissa said, but her voice wavered ever so slightly. The attendant met her gaze. I won't watch you humiliate a passenger further. A hush rippled through first class as the words sank in. Passengers stiffened in their seats, their earlier amusement replaced by a rising tide of discomfort. One by one, they muttered apologies to Diana, offering napkins, water, even assistance tucking away the ruined meal. Sasha stepped in, draping a blanket over Diana's lap and quietly retrieving fresh slacks from the overhead compartment. A steward pressed a fresh hot towel into Diana's hands. Diana's eyes flicked around, taking in the reversal. Clarissa's face paled. The applause that once cheered her cruelty now turned cold. Passengers shook their heads, some standing to applaud the intervening attendant. Thank you, they murmured to her, voices warm with genuine concern. Clarissa, realizing the tide had turned, pulled herself upright. My apologies, she said, voice brittle. I made a joke that went too far? The businesswoman in the navy suit narrowed her eyes. That wasn't a joke, she replied sharply. That was harassment. Murmurs of agreement swelled. You are all. Diana rose, taking the hot towel, her voice soft but resolute. Thank you, she said to the attendant who defended her. Then she turned to Clarissa. Your apology is noted. I would appreciate an apology from the airline in writing and a full refund for this flight. Her gaze was steady, unblinking. And I expect disciplinary action. No one should endure what I have. Clarissa swallowed, flush rising to her cheeks. She nodded once, tightly. Of course. I'll notify corporate immediately. Diana retrieved her phone, showing the recorded footage to a flight supervisor convening in the aisle. This is evidence of discriminatory treatment, she said, calm steel in her voice. I trust you'll handle it appropriately. The supervisor's jaw tightened. It will be addressed, he assured her. Around them, passengers leaned in, sympathetic eyes on Diana. Applause broke out again, this time in her favor. Soft but insistent, growing until it filled the cabin. Diana settled back into her seat, the new blanket warm around her legs, fresh slacks on their way. She accepted a champagne toast from the attendant. To dignity, she said, raising her flute. Glasses chimed, and the cabin erupted in a single, unified cheer. As the plane ascended, Diana closed her eyes for a moment, letting the warmth of solidarity flood through her. The humiliation had been epic, the cruelty unrelenting, but her response had been more so, measured, powerful, unstoppable. She had turned the spectacle back on her tormentor and reclaimed her rightful place in first class. The cabin hummed with renewed energy. Passengers leaned forward, eager to share their support, and high above the clouds, Diana Morales, undaunted, unbowed, smiled. Diana Morales sat back as the cabin lights dimmed to the pre-takeoff glow, the warmth of collective applause still humming through the air. But she knew the drama was far from over. Across the aisle, Clarissa Vaughn's shoulders were slumped, her usual poise replaced by a tight, defenseless posture. The cabin crew exchanged furtive glances and subtle nods, ready to support Diana if she needed it. The tension crackled like static before a storm, and Diana felt a surge of purpose. She would not let this end in polite words alone. She reached into her purse and pulled out her phone again, ready to capture any further missteps, but also determined to control the narrative herself. Just as the plane leveled off at 35,000 feet, a senior flight attendant appeared at Diana's side. Her name tag read Marianne Lopez. She leaned in close, voice soft but firm. Diana, I need to speak with you in private if you do not mind. She guided Diana to a small empty galley alcove near the rear of the cabin. The lighting was cooler there, the hum of the engines more pronounced. Diana followed, tucking her blanket around her shoulders, a small knot of apprehension twisted in her stomach. "What can I do for you?" Marianne asked, genuine concern in her eyes. Deanna took a breath. "I want to make sure this is documented properly. I need your help in filing an official complaint with the airline." Marianne nodded. "Of course." She pulled out a tablet and tapped on a form. "We can file this as discrimination and harassment. We will record your statement along with timestamps. You have my word that I will personally see it reaches senior management." Diana felt her chest ease slightly. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I also want to send a copy to the Department of Transportation. They have strict rules against this kind of treatment." Marianne's eyes widened in respectful surprise, but she nodded. "Absolutely. Dawn will never break with an injustice like this swept under the rug on my watch." Meanwhile, Clarissa hovered near the service station, tapping her fingers against polished metal, her mind racing. The applause earlier had been unexpected, and the flight attendant's intervention downright humiliating. Her cheeks still burned. She caught sight of Diana smiling politely into Marianne's tablet, and a cold anger sank into her gut. She would have to reclaim control or face ruin. She forced a tight smile and returned to her duties, but the confident air was gone. Back in her seat, Diana checked her phone and typed a brief post to her online community of retired professionals and advocates. "Just experienced blatant racial discrimination in first class by an airline employee. Video evidence recorded. Official complaint filed with airline and DOT. Will update as this unfolds." She hit send, and the message went out to her 50,000 followers. Within minutes, she saw notifications trickling in. Support, shares, messages offering solidarity. She closed the app and leaned back, satisfaction settling in her chest. The first round of beverages arrived, and Marianne personally delivered Diana a glass of sparkling water. "I wanted to make sure you were comfortable," she said. Diana smiled. "Thank you." She raised the glass in a small toast. Overhead, the captain's voice came on, polite and neutral. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have reached cruising altitude. We will be serving dinner in approximately 30 minutes. Thank you for flying with us tonight." The PA cut out, and the cabin resumed its soft murmur of voices. But now those voices carried respect, not derision. Diana felt heads turn to her, people offering her half smiles, thumbs up. The mood had shifted. No one would dare challenge her now. 30 minutes later, the dinner service began in earnest. Clarissa had been reassigned by Marianne to a more junior position, assisting at the rear galley rather than overseeing the first-class cabin. Her shoulders sagged as she overheard a flight attendant supervisor chide her quietly. She tried to steel herself, forcing a professional facade as she passed by Diana with a tray. But this time, Clarissa avoided eye contact. She set the tray on Diana's table with a trembling hand. Diana regarded the steaming entree, seared salmon, asparagus spears, roasted potatoes, and then she met Clarissa's gaze. "I appreciate the meal," she said, voice calm but carrying the weight of every injustice she had endured. "Thank you for your service." Clarissa's lips quivered, but she managed a stiff nod. Diana turned back to her plate and took a bite. The salmon was perfectly cooked, flaky, moist, and despite everything, she found herself savoring the flavor. She allowed herself a small moment of normalcy amid the drama. As she ate, her phone buzzed again. Her post had gone semi-viral, and she received messages from national news outlets requesting statements, from civil rights lawyers offering pro bono representation, even from the airline's corporate communications department. One email read, "We are deeply concerned about your experience. A senior vice president will reach out to you directly upon landing." Diana frowned at her screen. It was almost too immediate. She forwarded the email to Marianne and asked her to confirm its authenticity. Marianne replied swiftly, "That came from corporate. I have confirmation." She whispered a note to Diana. "They want to contain this." Diana nodded to herself. "Good. Let them scramble." She knew that in the hours ahead, Clarissa would be facing inquiries, that her manager would have to justify Clarissa's actions, and that Diana's own voice would reverberate through boardrooms and social media feeds. She allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. The rest of the flight passed without further incident. Diana chatted quietly with Marianne, exchanging stories about their families, their favorite travel memories, laughter threading between the tense moments. Marianne confided that she had worked for the airline for over 20 years and had never witnessed such a display of cruelty. "I am truly sorry for what you endured. Thank you for handling it with such grace." Diana felt a flutter of warmth. It meant everything to her that someone within the system was on her side. When the seatbelt sign finally blinked off over Chicago O'Hare, Diana stood and gathered her things. She gave Marianne a grateful hug. "Please keep me updated on the complaint," she said. "I will reach out to your office personally." Marianne nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. As Diana made her way through the cabin toward the exit, passengers came out of their shells, offering her pats on the back, compliments on her courage, even tears in their eyes. One elderly couple said they should be ashamed of themselves. "Thank you for standing up." A young man said, "That was incredible what you did. I'm proud to have witnessed it." Diana's heart swelled. She had not only defended herself, but had inspired compassion in others. At the front, Clarissa stood by the door, handing out customs cards with a stiff professionalism. When Diana approached, Clarissa lifted her chin in a thin nod. Diana paused, then she smiled graciously. "Thank you for your assistance tonight. I wish you well." Clarissa's eyes flickered, caught off guard by the genuine kindness. She found her voice at last. "Ma'am, I'm sorry." Diana inclined her head. "Your apology is appreciated." They stood in silence for a breath. Then Diana turned and stepped onto the jet bridge, the applause of her fellow travelers echoing behind her. She walked with her chin up, her back straight, and for the first time that evening she felt truly triumphant. Outside, the airport was cool, about 50 degrees with a light breeze off Lake Michigan. Diana zipped her coat and hailed a cab. As she got in, she glanced back at the plane, remembering every moment of humiliation and every moment of victory. She turned to the cab driver. "Take me to the Sheraton downtown, please. I have a late-night meeting with corporate." The driver nodded, shifting the cab into gear. Hours later, a small conference room at the Sheraton glowed under fluorescent lights. Diana sat opposite the airline's senior vice president of customer experience, a man named Thomas Bennett. He offered a tray of refreshments and cleared his throat. "Mrs. Morales, we deeply regret your experience. The actions of our employee were unacceptable. We will be terminating Ms. Vaughn's employment effective immediately. We will provide you with a full refund for your ticket and a voucher for future travel. We also intend to review our training protocols to prevent this from happening again." Diana listened politely, but she leaned forward, voice firm. "That is a start, but not enough. I want a public apology in all media outlets where my story appears. I want your board to issue a statement condemning racial discrimination. And I want a donation in my name to a civil rights organization of your choice. Only then will I consider this matter resolved." Thomas Bennett's expression flickered between surprise and admiration. He nodded. "Understood. We will do as you request, Mrs. Morales, and we thank you for bringing this to our attention. We will update you within 24 hours. Diana gathered her purse and stood. "Thank you for your time," she said. "I will be in touch." She walked out of the meeting room feeling lighter than she had in days. She had turned a moment of cruelty into a catalyst for real change. Back in her hotel room, she checked her phone and saw the first wave of corporate statements posted online. The airline's official account tweeted, "We apologize to Mrs. Diana Morales for the unacceptable treatment she endured. We stand against discrimination and are committed to improving our service." The message was concise and unequivocal. "Good," she murmured. She poured herself a small glass of red wine and raised it to the empty room. "To justice," she said softly, then took a sip. The tannins were strong, warming her from the inside out. She settled into an armchair by the window and let her thoughts wander. Ahead of her lay the days of follow-up calls, of statements to the press, even of a potential civil lawsuit. But for now, she allowed herself to rest. She had reclaimed her dignity, exposed cruelty for what it was, and forced an institution to look inward. She had shown that age and color could not erase her worth or her voice. A sliver of moon shone through the window, reflecting off the lake beyond the city skyline. Diana closed her eyes and breathed deeply. Tomorrow she would continue the fight, but tonight she was simply Diana Morales, survivor, champion, and example of unwavering strength. The next morning, the headlines blared across news sites. Brave passenger exposes first-class racism. Airline announces sweeping reforms. Side by side with photos of Diana smiling gracefully, she allowed herself a small smile, scrolling through the coverage. The story was hers to tell now, and she would ensure the spotlight stayed on the issues, not just her, until real change took hold. Meanwhile, across town, Clarissa sat in a small management office at the airline's headquarters. She stared at her termination letter, the words, "Confirmation of your dismissal effective immediately," glaring in black and white. Her lawyer's fee agreement lay beside it. She felt a hollow ache. The humiliation she had inflicted on Diana Morales had been returned tenfold, leaving her professional reputation in ruins. No one wanted to work with someone exposed as discriminatory. She picked up her phone and dialed her mother. "Marlene?" she whispered when her mother answered. "Yes, sweetie?" her mother asked. I messed up. They're firing me." Clarissa's voice cracked. "I don't know what to do." Her mother's voice was gentle. "You know who you are, Clara. You can rebuild. Just remember to treat others with respect." Clarissa hung up and let out a shaky breath. She stared around the office, the empty cubicle, the blinking cursor on the computer screen, and finally closed her eyes. She had learned a hard lesson, the worst kind that life can teach. 2 months later, the airline implemented a comprehensive anti-bias program. All employees underwent sensitivity training, and a new reporting system was launched so passengers could easily log complaints. Diana Morales was invited as a guest speaker to launch the initiative, standing on a small stage at the airline's annual conference. She spoke calmly and eloquently about her experience, about the necessity of empathy and respect at every level of service. Her words landed with the authority of lived reality, and the audience responded with standing ovations. Later, she met with other survivors, with activists, with journalists. She donated the airline's gift to the NAACP Legal Defense Fund and met with the director to discuss further steps. Her fight for justice had rippled far beyond that one cabin row. She had turned personal pain into public progress. On a bright spring morning, she boarded a different first-class flight, this time with a small group of young advocates at her side. As she settled into her seat, she recognized several of the crew who had supported her: Marianne, Sasha, even Mr. Bennett, the vice president, now promoting real change from within. They greeted her with genuine smiles, and she smiled back. The cabin felt different now, inclusive, respectful, a place where everyone truly belonged. Diana Morales leaned back, closed her eyes, and breathed in the soft hum of the engines. She had taken on cruelty and won. And as the plane climbed above the clouds toward the horizon, she felt that the sky itself was her limit. The cabin lights glowed softly as Diana Morales settled into the plush seat beside her 3 young companions, advocates she'd invited along to witness what real change looked like in action. She tucked a silk scarf around her neck, the badge of honor she'd received at the airline conference pinned to her lapel. Just beyond the curtain, the flight attendants who had once cowered under Clarissa's cruelty now moved with genuine warmth, greeting Diana by name as they passed. For the first time, she felt like this cabin was truly hers. A gentle chime announced boarding completion. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Good evening, folks. We're ready to roll. Thank you for joining us today. We hope you enjoy your flight." No hint of awkward clearing of throats followed it, only sincere calm. Diana offered each of her companions a quiet smile. "You know," she said, leaning toward them so her voice carried just enough, "this isn't just about me. It's about every traveler who's ever been made to feel less than, for any reason." The youngest of the group, a bright-eyed law student named Keisha, nodded. "Seeing how you handled it, I'll never forget it." A flight attendant approached with a silver tray. "Welcome aboard again, Mrs. Morales. May I offer you a flute of champagne?" she asked. The glass caught the overhead light like morning dew. Diana accepted, tucking her glass safely in the cup holder. "Thank you, Marianne," she said, noticing that the name tag matched the woman who had spearheaded her earlier complaint. Marianne smiled, genuine relief in her eyes. "It's my pleasure, ma'am." Sorority Lynch took a sip, then reached into her bag and produced the tablet Marianne had lent her on the last flight. "I'd like to show you something," she said quietly, passing it across to her companions. On the screen was a video montage of the previous flight, the cold drop of the ticket, the offered swap of seats, the spilled gravy, and finally, Clarissa's humiliation in the aisle. The young advocates leaned in, their jaws dropping at each scene. Diana watched their faces, feeling a spark of hope. "This is the power of documentation, and of standing up," she said softly. Overhead bins closed with satisfying clicks. The engines whirred as the aircraft pushed back. Diana pressed a finger to start her own recorded message. "To anyone watching this, you deserve respect, you deserve dignity, and if you face discrimination, use your voice." She ended the recording and saved the file, her heart pounding with the knowledge that her words might help someone halfway around the world. As the plane climbed over the glimmering city lights below, service began. Tray tables unfolded with effortless grace, and silverware gleamed on crisp linen. The menu offered choices that reflected a growing trend in first-class cuisine. Sustainable salmon, heirloom tomato salad, quinoa risotto. Diana selected the salad, her eyes dancing as she tasted the vibrant basil dressing. Around her, other passengers murmured approval. It was clear the airline had learned from its past mistakes and invested in quality. Midway through the meal, a subtle commotion stirred near the front. A matronly woman in her 70s shuffled down the aisle, clutching a compatriot's arm, clearly lost. The attendant guiding her wore a worried expression, glancing toward the cockpit for guidance. Marianne caught Diana's eye and gestured. Diana rose gracefully. "May I help?" she offered to the older woman, gently taking her hand. The woman's eyes brimmed with tears. "Thank you, dear. I think I boarded the wrong cabin." She had wandered in from economy, drawn by the soft murmur and the promise of legroom, but she clearly felt out of place. Her lacy cardigan and sensible shoes marked her as someone unfamiliar with luxury travel. Diana smiled. "You're in first class now, and we're so glad to have you." She guided her back to a seat at the bulkhead that Marianne had held open. "Sit here. I'll summon the attendant to bring you whatever you like." The woman's face brightened. "I haven't flown in years. I was so nervous." Diana patted her hand. "You're safe now." The cabin hummed with an unusual warmth. Passengers who had only minutes before raised eyebrows now glowed with shared compassion. A businessman offered the woman a warm drink from his own tray, and a mother nearby offered her tablet stand for reading. Diana felt a lump rise in her throat. This was the community she'd fought to create. Moments later, Marianne arrived with a pot of chamomile tea. "Here you go," she said, pressing a cup into the new passenger's hands. "Take your time." The woman sipped, settling into the softness of the seat. "Bless you," she croaked. "I thought I'd be scolded." Diana turned back to her companions. "See that? That's the difference we make when we choose empathy over dismissal." Keisha pressed her hand to hers. "I'll never forget this." The meal concluded with a delicate chocolate mousse. Diana allowed her friends to share the tray. She wanted them to savor every detail. As they laughed quietly, the young advocates described how they planned to launch their own campaigns against bias in education, in healthcare. Diana nodded, feeling pride ripple through her. This was the true victory, sparking change beyond herself. A soft clink on the aisle caught her attention. Clarissa Vaughn reappeared, dressed in plain clothes with no name tag. She'd been demoted to the lounge attendant's uniform and reassigned off first-class duty entirely. Her posture was hesitant, and for the first time she looked uncertain. Diana met her eyes and offered a gentle nod. Clarissa paused, then approached slowly. In her hand was a single long-stemmed white rose, a symbol of apology. She extended it toward Diana, voice trembling. "Mrs. Morales," she began, I owe you more than words can say. I'm sorry for everything. I have been asked to apologize personally and to attend mandatory sensitivity training." Diana accepted the rose, noting the slight quiver in Clarissa's hand. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I appreciate your apology." She held the rose gently by its stem. "I believe you can learn and do better." Clarissa's shoulders relaxed, tears glinting on her lashes. "I will." The cabin grew hushed as passengers witnessed this moment. Some dabbed at their eyes, others whispered encouragement. Diana closed her eyes briefly. "It's not too late for any of us to change," she said, voice soft but firm. "Thank you for choosing to do the right thing." A round of applause rippled through first class, not mocking, but honoring the exchange. Clarissa retreated, head bowed but a new determination in her stride. Diana turned back to her friends, who were smiling with amazement. Soon the seatbelt sign chimed, signaling that they were over open ocean. The cabin lights dimmed for rest. Diana reclined her seat, pulling the plush cushion behind her. She pressed play on her tablet, this time viewing the video of her own apology to Clarissa. The hush of the cabin's support captured in the background. She let it play on loop, a reminder that even the cruelest actions can be met with grace, and that every single passenger, regardless of age, color, or background, deserves to be treated with humanity. A lullaby of engines hummed, and Diana felt her eyes grow heavy. She reached out to Keisha, placing a hand on hers. "Promise me you'll keep fighting," she whispered. "Promise me you'll stand up, no matter how small the injustice." Keisha squeezed her hand. "I promise." Diana closed her eyes, the gentle sway of the airplane rocking her towards sleep. Outside the window, the stars shone like watchful guardians, and in her heart, Diana Morales felt a steady flame of hope burn brighter than ever, illuminating the path ahead, not just for her, but for every person who longed to soar without limits. "Oh wait, don't tell me, you worked in aviation, didn't you?" Clarissa Vaughn's voice was sugar-sweet, but her words cut like broken glass. Diana Morales's fingers twitched in her lap, the only betrayal of the storm inside her. Clarissa spun slightly to face nearby passengers, lowering her voice so everyone could lean in and catch every delicious insult. "Can you imagine 40 years in the industry? Now that is dedication. Let me guess, Mrs. Morales, you stood behind a counter, ripped tickets, maybe pushed a drink cart like I do?" Someone in the front row chortled. "More like scrubbing floors in the terminals." Laughter rippled through the cabin. Easy, casual, and cruel. Diana's chest tightened. She inhaled slowly, measured, but Clarissa was already leaning in closer, lips curling into a triumphant grin. "Or maybe," she whispered so only Diana could hear, "you were one of those sad people who pretended to have power while the real bosses made all the decisions." A heavy silence followed, thick as molasses, but Diana's gaze stayed locked straight ahead. Clarissa wasn't done. She tapped a service tray against her palm for dramatic effect. "So, Mrs. Morales, are you going to help out, or is that beneath you now?" Diana did not move. Clarissa let the pause stretch on until it hurt. "That's too bad," she mused, turning on her heel and strutting back toward the galley, her voice trailing over her shoulder. "I thought you'd want to relive the glory days." The cabin returned to its sleek routine. Champagne sipped, stock reports flipped, yet Diana felt stripped down to her bones. Clarissa hadn't only humiliated her here and now, she'd reached back and ripped apart every proud memory Diana had built over decades. Pride, identity, worth, reduced to a punchline. As dinner service wrapped, Clarissa glided down the aisle, offering pleasant smiles to the elite, while deliberately ignoring Diana's tightened jaw and unyielding posture. Then Diana stood slowly, tapping her armrest, and began the short walk toward the lavatory at the front of the cabin. Clarissa paused, a cruel smirk ghosting across her lips. Timing was everything. The lavatory door swung shut and locked behind Diana with a click that sounded too loud in the hush of first class. Moments later, feet padding softly on the carpet signaled Clarissa's return. She produced a small security key, the one every flight attendant carried for emergencies, and slipped it into the outside lock. With a lazy flick of her wrist, she jammed the door shut. Satisfaction settled deep in her chest as she straightened, watching the unknowing passengers continue their conversation. Let her stew in there, she thought. An old woman stuck in a restroom. Perfect. 40 minutes ticked by. Passengers boarded and settled. Flight attendants passed by with trays of amuse-bouche and fresh towels. No one batted an eye at the locked door until a concerned voice rang out. "Excuse me, is the lavatory occupied? It's been a while." Clarissa lifted her eyes from her tablet. "Oh," she said lightly. "Mrs. Morales went in earlier, you know how it is." Clarissa offered a delicate shrug. "Older passengers sometimes take longer. I'm sure she'll be out soon." The woman hesitated, shrugged, and moved on. No one else asked. Inside, Diana hammered on the door, testing the lock, her fingers trembling from anger more than from fear. "Come on," she pounded harder. "Hello?" The cabin beyond lay silent save for the hum of the engines. Clarissa chose that moment to saunter back. A soft tap on the door made Diana freeze. Oh dear, did the lock stick? Clarissa crooned as she reinserted her key. With exaggerated ease, she swung the door open. "You must have jammed it, Mrs. Morales," she teased, batting her eyelashes. Diana stepped out, shoulders squared, but Clarissa blocked her path with a tilt of her hip. "Actually," she murmured, voice low, "before you go back to your seat, I think you owe me something." Passengers craned their necks, curious. Clarissa's tone was so casual it felt criminal. "You were in there, quite a while, you know, had the whole cabin waiting. Don't you think you should apologize? They say it's polite." Diana's stomach nodded. Her breath was steady, but the humiliation pressed down on her like concrete. She raised her chin, meeting Clarissa's gaze. "Not here," she told herself, "not now." But every head in first class was trained on her. Some faces held sympathy, most held expectation. Clarissa leaned in, still blocking Diana's path. "If you want to return to your seat, that is." Seconds stretched. Diana's fingers curled into invisible fists. Then she spoke, voice soft but audible. "I'm sorry." Those two words hit the aisle like a bomb. Passengers let out scattered sighs, some of relief, others of thinly veiled amusement. Clarissa's lips curved into an all-too-satisfied smile. "See, that wasn't so hard." She swept aside, allowing Diana to pass. Diana walked back to her original seat, her movements slow and deliberate, each step measured like a vow. The second Clarissa pivoted away, Diana pulled out her phone and hit record. Suddenly, Clarissa's expression shifted as she tapped a discreet button on her sleeve. An announcement crackled over the intercom. "Ms. Vaughn, please report to the galley." Clarissa blinked in surprise, then flashed an apologetic smile to the cabin. "Duty calls." Two uniformed officers appeared behind her, advancing with clipped steps. The cabin fell dead silent, every gaze now trained on Diana. Clarissa turned to her with a patronizing tilt of her head. "These gentlemen need to have a word with you." Shock rippled across the cabin. Diana's breath caught. Clarissa's victory seemed complete. Security about to escort her from first class, from the flight itself. But Diana's gaze snapped to her phone, then lifted to meet every passenger's eyes. She tapped play. The cabin filled with the unmistakable recording of Clarissa's mockery, her cruel whispers, the locked door, the forced apology. Passengers leaned in, horror blooming on their faces as they listened to non-stop proof of discrimination and abuse of power. Whispers turned to gasps, gasps to outcries. A chorus of voices rose. "This is appalling. Apologize to her. She has every right to be here." Even the stern officers hesitated, looking from the tablet to Diana's calm yet fierce expression. Marianne Lopez stepped forward, her uniform crisp, her eyes blazing. "I'm sorry, officers, but I believe Mrs. Morales deserves to stay, and this employee needs to be removed." Clarissa's cheeks flushed scarlet. The officers exchanged a nod and then turned to Clarissa. "Ma'am, please, come with us." Clarissa's practiced calm shattered. She stammered apologies, but no one listened. Passengers rose from their seats, offering Deanna words of support, shielding her as the officers led Clarissa away. Deanna stood, head held high, as the cabin broke into spontaneous applause. She bowed subtly, then returned to her seat, chest heaving with relief. The trolley clattered on as a new attendant rolled up, offering Deanna fresh water. "Thank you, Mrs. Morales." The cabin hummed with solidarity. As the doors closed and the lights dimmed for an in-flight movie, Diana reclined her seat and exhaled deeply. She pressed record again and spoke directly into her phone. "Her name is Clarissa Vaughn, and this is what racism looks like in first class." I stood up. "You can too." She ended the recording and set the phone aside. A soft murmur of conversation drifted through the cabin. Passengers sharing details of what they'd witnessed united in indignation. For the rest of the flight, Diana felt a quiet power in the air. When the seatbelt sign blinked off over the Pacific, her fellow passengers offered her warm smiles and words of praise. She pushed a strand of silver hair behind her ear and surveyed the cabin. People she'd never met, but who had chosen empathy over apathy. Diana Morales curled into her plush seat, letting the soft hum of the engines cradle her. In this moment, she knew that her triumph wasn't just personal. It was proof that dignity, once reclaimed, can change the world. The two officers stepped forward, badges gleaming. "Ma'am," one of them said, voice respectful but firm, "we'd like to escort you off the plane." He extended a gloved hand toward Diana's elbow. Clarissa's eyes glittered with triumph. She leaned in, voice low so only Diana could hear. "Apologize again. Accept your place or leave. Your choice." The cruelty in her tone was unmistakable. Diana's heart pounded, not with fear but with the fury of someone marched to the gallows for daring to She took a slow breath, her gaze sweeping over the assembled passengers. Some tense with anticipation, others wearing thin masks of disapproval. Just as the officers reached out to usher Diana up the aisle, a voice cleaved through the hush. "Wait!" The single syllable carried the authority of a judge's gavel. Heads jerked toward the front of the cabin, where a distinguished man in his early 60s rose from his seat. His suit was tailored to perfection, deep charcoal with pinstripes so fine they looked woven from moonlight. Silver hair framed a face both sculpted and severe, eyes sharp as cut glass. He did not look at Clarissa. He fixed his gaze directly on Diana Morales, and in that look Clarissa saw something she had never encountered before. Raw, unflinching respect. Clarissa's triumphant smile wavered. "Sir," she began, voice brittle, "please remain seated." But the man did not blink. He folded his hands behind his back and spoke again, his voice low but carrying through every row. "Do you even know who you are treating like a criminal?" Panic flickered across Clarissa's features. She opened her mouth to respond but was cut off by a new interruption, this one louder and sharper. "Captain to first class." The cabin door at the front swung open and Captain Reynolds appeared in uniform, cap under one arm, coffee cup in hand. His expression was taut, eyes wide as they flicked between the manifest clutched in the officer's hands and Diana herself. At the mention of her name, his face paled. He set the coffee cup down, porcelain clinking against the service cart, and cleared his throat. "Stand down," he commanded, voice absolute. The officers froze mid-step, confusion plain on their faces. "Stand down," he repeated, tone edged with steel. "This matter is closed." Clarissa's chest tightened, her moment of victory vanishing like smoke. The distinguished gentleman took a step forward. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, voice rich and resonant, "allow me to introduce you to Diana Morales." The cabin exhaled a collective gasp. Whispers ricocheted off the polished walls. "No way. She's who?" A woman clutched her designer scarf as if to steady herself. Diana's lips curved in a small, serene smile. The gentleman continued, "Mrs. Morales is the founder and chairwoman of this airline." The words landed like thunder. Passengers stiffened. Some had their hands over their mouths. The realization rippled through the cabin. They had been complicit in humiliating the very architect of their comfort and prestige. Captain Reynolds approached, voice formal. "Mrs. Morales, please accept our sincerest apologies. Clarissa Vaughn is hereby suspended from duty, effective immediately." A murmur of approval rose from the passengers. Clarissa's eyes darted around, pleading for support that no one offered. The lead officer spoke again. "Ma'am, please return to your seat." Clarissa's legs trembled as she took a hesitant step back, her chest heaved with ragged breaths. For the first time, her polished posture crumpled. The intercom crackled to life and the airline's executive voice came through, firm and final. "Ms. Vaughn is hereby suspended from all duties. Report to the galley immediately for deboarding procedures." The cabin's atmosphere shifted from shock to vindication. A man near the aisle whispered, "She should have known better." A mother patted her child's hand, offering a reassuring glance. Even the window shades felt brighter, as if the cabin itself celebrated the triumph of dignity over contempt. Diana rose from her seat as Clarissa passed, waiting a respectful moment before offering a single nod. In that gesture lay years of accumulated grace. Clarissa's eyes flicked to Diana, shimmering with unshed tears. She swallowed hard and forced out, "Mrs. Morales, I apologize," but her voice cracked, and the apology felt like ash. Diana's nod was gentle but unyielding. "Thank you," she said, voice soft yet carrying through the cabin. "I trust this will never happen again." Security escorted Clarissa through the open door of first class, past the stunned looks of flight attendants and passengers alike. The door slid shut behind her with a muted hiss. A final hush fell across the cabin, broken only by the whisper of fabric as Diana eased back into her seat. Marianne reached for Diana's hand, offering a comforting squeeze. Sasha hovered nearby with a fresh glass of water. Passengers smiled and nodded, lining the aisle in silent tribute to Diana's courage. Moments later, the captain's voice announced, "Cabin crew, please prepare for landing." The seatbelt sign blinked off, and the gentle click of trays returning to upright position signaled the end of service. Deanna leaned back, her heart still racing but with gratitude flooding through her. She pressed the call button and requested a hand towel. As Marianne unfolded the soft cloth and draped it over Deanna's lap, a ripple of warmth passed through the cabin. Even the most hardened business travelers seemed touched by the display of respect. As the plane descended toward the runway, Diana gazed out the window at the city lights below, a tapestry of hope and renewal. She reflected on the hours of humiliation she had endured, locked in the laboratory, forced to apologize for her very presence, taunted by someone who believed rank and color could define her worth. Yet here she was, surrounded by strangers who had found their compassion and stood by her side. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply, letting the tension seep from her shoulders. The wheels touched down with a smooth thud, and a collective sigh rose from the cabin. Diana unbuckled her seatbelt, arranged her scarf and coat with practiced ease, and gathered her purse. Passengers nearby offered smiles and soft claps. A small boy shyly waved and whispered, "Good job, ma'am." Diana's eyes shimmered with tears she would not shed. "Thank you," she murmured, voice catching, "and thank you for believing in me." As the cabin doors opened, Diana rose and made her way to the front, where Marianne waited with a folder of paperwork, her official complaint, a personal apology letter from the airline, and instructions on how to follow up with the Department of Transportation. Diana accepted the folder with a graceful nod. "Your support means everything," she told Marianne. "I will use this to make sure no one else endures what I have." Passengers filed out behind her, many offering cheers and words of encouragement. Diana paused at the galley curtain as Clarissa's departure echoed in the background, the soft murmur of security radios and airport announcements mingling in the air. She stood tall, a beacon of resilience and dignity. For hours, she had been the target of hatred and cruelty. Now she walked off that plane with her reputation restored and her voice amplified. Outside the jet bridge, a small crowd of journalists and airline executives waited. Among them was the distinguished gentleman in the charcoal suit who offered Diana his arm. She accepted, and together they stepped into the terminal lights. Flashbulbs popped as reporters called out for statements. Diana lifted her chin and addressed them with calm authority. "This airline believes in dignity," she began, voice clear. "Today we proved that cruelty has no place in the skies or anywhere else." As she spoke, Clarissa Vaughn's fate was sealed behind her, suspended, terminated, banned from flying. But Diana's victory reached far beyond a single flight. Her strength shattered barriers and opened hearts. And in that moment, she knew her story would inspire change. One apology, one policy revision, one act of compassion at a time. The terminal buzzed with cameras and microphones as Diana Morales stepped into the makeshift press area, her silver hair softly lit by the overhead fluorescence. Reporters clamored around her, flashes popping like distant fireworks. She paused, gathered herself, and raised a steady hand. "Thank you all for coming," she said, voice warm but resolute. "I want every person who ever felt invisible to know that dignity matters more than a seat assignment. Today, this airline has taken steps to ensure nobody endures what I did, but the real story is about all of you who spoke up, who recorded, who refused to look away." A roar of approval echoed through the crowd, and cameras swung toward the airline's banner pulsing with company colors. Diana's calm strength had already become the headline. Meanwhile, Clarissa Vaughn sat in a cramped one-bedroom apartment 3 miles from the airport. She stared at her reflection in a cracked mirror, her uniform hanging limp on a chair. The TV blared a replay of Diana's press conference. Clarissa's fingers trembled as she reached for the remote and muted the sound. She sank onto the bed, phone in hand, and scrolled through social media. Comments ranged from praise for Diana to brutal mockery directed at her. Screenshots showed passengers giving her weary looks, and one viral clip captured her locking the lavatory door. Her stomach knotted and tears pricked at her eyes. For years, she had believed her job entitled her to deference, but now she was stripped of uniform, title, and respect. The next morning, Clarissa applied for a cashier position at a local grocery store. She walked into the brightly lit aisle, greeted by the scent of fresh produce, and smiled at the manager behind the counter. He glanced at her resume, brows raised when he saw her former job title. After a brief chat, he shook his head. "Sorry, Clarissa. We're looking for someone with retail experience." She thanked him, voice barely above a whisper, then wandered out into the parking lot, heart pounding. She tried calling a colleague for a reference, but no one answered. She sent emails to staffing agencies and posted on job sites, but each reply was the same: regret, impossibility, no openings. Her confidence unraveled with every rejection. Back in the executive offices of the airline, Diana Morales attended a gala at the Liberty Hotel. She wore a sapphire gown that shimmered like moonlight, and a medal pinned over her heart. The NALDAP Legal Defense Fund presented her with the Justice in Travel Award. As she accepted the trophy, she spoke about her grandparents, who arrived in this country with nothing but hope and dignity. She dedicated her honor to every worker who greets strangers with a smile and every passenger who recognizes that kindness is universal. Cameras flashed, guests applauded, and Diana's speech made headlines. Civil rights champion soars above hate. Her strength inspired hundreds in that grand ballroom. On a crowded commuter train, Clarissa overheard two passengers chatting about Diana's award. One said she deserved a national honor. The other joked that Clarissa should have scrubbed toilets instead of pushing carts. A knot tightened in Clarence's gut, but after a moment she closed her eyes and leaned against the window. If this was her new reality, she needed to accept it. When she got off at her stop, she saw her reflection in the glass doors. A woman without a future in aviation, with a tarnished name and no clear path forward. She felt sympathy for herself for the first time in years, sympathy tinged with regret. Clarissa eventually agreed to appear on a local morning show for a lessons learned segment. She sat under bright studio lights, her uniform replaced by a simple blouse and slacks. The host, a friendly man in a crisp suit, asked about her experience. Clarissa's voice shook as she began, "I want to apologize to Mrs. Morales. What I did was wrong. I let my prejudices govern my actions. I should have treated her with respect from the start." Her confession was earnest, her eyes pleading. But the studio audience remained cold. The host tried to smile. "Thank you for your apology," he said, voice clipped. "But let's hope we all learn from this." The applause was polite but sparse, and Clarissa felt the last bit of her shield dissolve. Across town at airline headquarters, the board approved a new terminal policy aimed at erasing prejudice. They unveiled the Diana Morales Lounge on Concourse B, walls painted in soft cream and gold tones, with a portrait of Diana smiling warmly. Inside, comfortable chairs, fresh coffee stations, magazines celebrating diversity, and plaques listing the names of employees recognized for exemplary service. An unveiling ceremony drew a crowd of reporters, employees, and passengers. Diana cut the ribbon, smiling broadly as champagne flowed and a jazz quartet played softly in the background. For Clarissa and the world, it was a symbol that progress could be real, that a single act of courage could shift an entire culture. Clarissa watched coverage of the lounge opening from her tiny apartment on an old laptop. As the camera panned across the portrait of Diana, Clarissa felt tears streaming down her face. She closed the laptop and buried her head in her hands. How could she move forward from here? She had lost the only career she'd ever known. After days of silence, she finally picked up her phone and called her father, who lived 2 states away. He answered after 3 rings. "Dad," she whispered, voice ragged. "I'm so sorry." He listened patiently, then said, "You have to build a new life. Apologize to more people. Show them you've changed bit by bit. That's all you can do." His words were gentle, but gave her a sliver of hope. In the days that followed, Clarissa attended sensitivity workshops organized by the airline, though now she paid out of pocket. She sat in circle discussions, listening as participants shared stories of bias and healing. She also volunteered at a community center, serving meals to seniors. Each tray she carried reminded her of the carts she once pushed, but without malice. Over weeks, she began forging genuine empathy, connecting with people she would once have shamed. The guilt never fully left her, but she learned that remorse meant little without action. Meanwhile, Diana Morales boarded another flight, this time as a guest of honor on a corporate retreat. The crew greeted her by name. Passengers paused to offer smiles instead of smirks. As she settled into her seat near the window, she noticed a plaque above her headrest. Diana Morales, Guest of Honor. A small flourish of gratitude warmed her heart. She pressed the call button, and the lead attendant arrived promptly. "Welcome aboard, Mrs. Morales. Can I get you anything?" Diana thought of the steaming soup Clarissa once offered as a barb, but declined. Instead, she said, "A glass of water, please." The attendant poured a crystal-clear bottle from the minibar. Diana sipped and gazed out at the runway lights. Upstairs in the cockpit, Captain Reynolds and his co-pilot exchanged nods as they taxied to the runway. "You think she'll ever know peace?" the co-pilot asked quietly. The captain looked back toward first class. "She already does," he replied. "When people see how she carried herself, how she sparked change that carries far more weight than any act of cruelty." The plane sped down the runway, then lifted into the night sky. Wings tipped with city lights, Diana felt a gentle lift in her chest as the ground dropped away. As the plane cruised above the clouds, Diana opened her journal and wrote a single line. "Today, I flew with hope." She closed the book and rested her head against the seat, peaceful. Below her, the world spread out in lights and shadows, a tapestry of lives intersecting. Somewhere she imagined Clarissa watching the same sunrise on a computer screen, learning that redemption is earned through humility, empathy, and service. In the weeks that followed, Clarissa found steady work as a home care aide, helping elderly clients with daily routines. It was not glamorous, and the pay was modest. But each morning when she tied her shoes and put on her name badge, she felt a sense of purpose she had never known behind the service cart. She never forgot her humiliation, but she carried it like a scar that reminded her never to devalue another human being. And Diana Morales continued to travel, continue to speak, continue to fight for respect in every corner of the sky. She joined panels, mentored young women in leadership, and even consulted with the airline on their new customer experience guidelines. Each time she boarded a plane, she walked past the Diana Morales lounge, pausing to read the engraved words printed beneath her portrait. "In memory of courage, in pursuit of dignity." She smiled softly and entered as a guest and a guardian of change. Their paths never crossed again in person, yet both women carried the memory of that fateful flight forward. One had risen on the wings of injustice to transform an industry. The other had fallen from privilege and clawed her way back through service and empathy. The world watched, learned, and moved a step closer to a sky where every passenger, regardless of age or color, could claim their rightful place. Clarissa Vaughn stood frozen as the supervisor's words sank in. "You can't do that," she whispered, but there was no turning back. Across the terminal, reporters gathered, cameras flashing. The headlines were already scrolling on their phones. Flight attendant humiliates airline CEO, gets fired mid-flight. Power trip ends in disaster. At the far end of the crowd, Diana Morales appeared, bathed in camera light, surrounded by executives and journalists. She walked forward with effortless grace. The woman who had been mocked, locked in a lavatory, forced to apologize for simply existing, now commanded the scene. A reporter called out, "Mrs. Morales, can you comment?" Diana adjusted the lapel of her blazer and smiled calmly. No one has the right to decide who deserves respect based on age, appearance, or assumptions. Starting today, we're enforcing zero tolerance for anyone who abuses their power. We will remove employees who demean our passengers, and we will retrain our entire staff to honor every human being. Clarissa's knees buckled as Diana's words echoed through the terminal. The final blow landed, not with anger, but with professionalism and public accountability, ensuring Clarissa Vaughn would never work in aviation again. She pushed through the stunned crowd, unable to board a plane she once ruled. If you enjoyed this epic, karma-filled story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more. What moment felt most satisfying to you? Did Clarissa deserve even worse? Let us know where you're watching from in the comments below.